There's a belief that a lot of Americans are still clinging to. I was clinging to it for a while. I know people in my audience are still sort of holding out hope. And it's because we are in a moment of outrageous dystopian authoritarianism in Washington, D.C. And the belief that many of us did and some of us are still clinging to is that if things get really bad, we have a system developed to eventually correct itself. If a president crosses enough lines, we have guardrails, they're going to kick in, institutions will step up, accountability is going to happen. And if Donald Trump's second term so far has made anything clear, it's that if the United States were a fully functional democracy, Donald Trump would no longer be president of the United States. And I don't mean that he would eventually be voted out. I mean that in a fully functional democracy, Donald Trump would have been removed if the guardrails still had any teeth. This isn't that Trump's ideology is different than mine. Of course it is. But George W. Bush's ideology was different than mine. And you can name other presidents whose ideologies were different than mine. This is not about that. This is about a basic sort of set of standards. And in functioning democracies, leaders are removed for abusing power. Leaders are removed for undermining elections. Leaders are removed for using state authority for personal retaliation. That would be a normal, basic thing. In other countries, it happens. Governments fall over scandals that with Trump, they wouldn't even be top 10 controversies. But here in the United States, the abnormal has been normalized. And I have started in 2017, I was talking about hypernormalization, and now we have to resist becoming accustomed to what is very much not normal. But let me give you some examples just from this year. Forget about the period when Biden was president and all the things Trump did during that period. Forget about Donald Trump's first term. Just not hypothetical, 2025 under Donald Trump, now as we move into 2026. Trump didn't just threaten his political enemies. He followed through. He installed loyalists and personal attorneys with no meaningful prosecutorial background into the DOJ and used those appointments to pursue indictments of political rivals. That alone would end a presidency elsewhere. We look at civil service. Through executive action, Trump effectively dismantled decades of protection for career federal employees and reclassified tens of thousands of civil servants so they could be fired for failing loyalty tests. And there was this period where hiring was going to require writing a pro-Trump essay. And so competence stopped mattering, the law stopped mattering, and the only thing that mattered was personal allegiance to Donald Trump. That is total authoritarianism. And that is something that should get a president in a democracy removed. We've also seen something that should still shock people, even if it doesn't. Trump seized operational control of local law enforcement in Washington, D.C., and deployed the National Guard into Chicago over the objections of local leaders. That is not law and order. That is a president testing the outer limits of federal power and daring institutions to stop him. They didn't, and it didn't stop there. Trump issued executive orders targeting private law firms that represented political opponents of his and stripped them of federal contracts, revoked security clearances. The message is unmistakable. You represent the wrong people, even though this is what lawyers represent people, but you represent the wrong people as far as Trump is concerned, the government will punish you. Any one of these actions on its own would trigger removal proceedings in a healthy democracy. I don't think we have a healthy democracy because doing all of that stuff, not just one of those things, has not even slowed Trump down. So the question isn't really why is Trump like this? That's a question about personality and authoritarianism and the people that have sort of roped him into this political movement that he's a part of. The real question is why the system hasn't stopped him. And it's a kind of uncomfortable question to answer because we have to accept the system's not functioning the way we were taught it does. We were taught that we had guardrails that would prevent this. And we see impeachment becoming sort of a partisan ritual where Republicans just go, yeah, not interested. Don't care what he did. I'm not interested. Congress has largely abdicated its role, choosing political survival over institutional responsibility. And the courts move really slowly and are very deferential to Donald Trump and will often allow sweeping actions, even if they later review and say, yeah, that wasn't good. The delay, the slow speed, is a form of permission. Whenever this comes up, the defenses are always the same. But Trump was elected. Yeah, he was elected, but elections don't grant immunity. This would destabilize the country. What I would argue is destabilizing is teaching future presidents you can get away with everything because nothing has consequences anymore. That's the precedent that is being set right now. If Trump can dismantle federal agencies by fiat and ignore court orders he doesn't like and weaponize the IRS against universities and nonprofits that disagree with him, then the next president can at least do that and probably more. And the one after that could get away with even more. So this really isn't about Trump being uniquely evil. It's that the system has failed a basic stress test. We can talk about whether Trump is uniquely evil or uniquely bad. What I mean is this conversation isn't really about that. A functional democracy wouldn't be arguing, is accountability too political? Would it be too partisan to try to hold him accountable? It would have acted, and we don't have that in this country. This standard applies no matter who is in the Oval Office. If a Democratic president behaved this way, removal should be the expectation. It happens to be a Republican president, and that should also be the expectation. Once accountability becomes optional, democracy becomes performative. What Trump's second term has exposed isn't just his authoritarian instincts. We saw those during his first term. We saw that during the period between his terms when Joe Biden was president. A system that relies on good faith alone collapses when someone decides they no longer act in good faith. And if anything has been revealed during the Trump political era about the framers of the Constitution and the founders of this country, it's that they made a good faith assumption that was wrong, which was nobody with the bad faith of Trump will ever be elected. The people would never elect such a person, and they did. And now we have to contend with the fact that Donald Trump is still in office, and it really tells us something unsettling about the country we're living in. The low-hanging fruit, the easy criticism is it tells us something about the people that voted for Trump. And it does. We've talked about that. There was we've had a national IQ test here, and we failed it, unfortunately. And we already know that. But it also tells us something about the way the country is set up. And the guardrails we believe we have, they're not strong enough, and we are seeing it every day under Donald Trump. Thanks for watching. Check out another one of our videos and make sure to subscribe so YouTube keeps our content in your feed. And if you prefer audio, subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple.